Nobody saw it coming. The courtroom had settled into its usual rhythm. Lawyers shuffling papers, reporters scribbling notes, the judge preparing for another long day of testimony. But then, the door creaked open, and in walked Janice Combs, the mother of Sean Diddy Combs. You could hear the collective gasp ripple through the room like a wave of electricity. Even Diddy, who had been calm and composed throughout much of the trial, froze. His eyes widened, his jaw clenched. This wasn't just another witness. This was his mother, a woman who had stood by him through scandal after scandal, a woman who, until this moment, had been silent, loyal. Now she was walking straight toward the witness stand, and she didn't look like a mother defending her son. She looked like a woman carrying the weight of too many secrets. And when she finally opened her mouth to speak, what came out shattered everything we thought we knew. For years, Janice Combs was seen as the quiet force behind the empire. She didn't chase headlines or grant interviews, but her presence was always there. At award shows, in the background of red carpets, quietly proud yet fiercely protective. Diddy often spoke about her in interviews, calling her his rock, his inspiration, the woman who made him believe anything was possible. But what the public never saw was the growing distance between mother and son behind closed doors. According to insiders, Janice had grown increasingly uneasy over the years, not just about Diddy's lifestyle, but about the kind of power he was accumulating and what he was willing to do to keep it. She reportedly knew things, heard things, saw things no mother should have to witness about her own child. But for decades, she stayed silent, perhaps out of fear or guilt, or the faint hope that he'd change. That silence, she now says, became a prison. And the moment she stepped into that courtroom, she was finally ready to break out. So what changed? Why would a mother who defended her son for decades suddenly decide to testify against him in a federal courtroom? According to Janice, it wasn't one moment. It was a slow unraveling. The stories coming out in court weren't just disturbing, they were personal. She recognized patterns in those testimonies, the manipulation, the fear, the destruction left behind, and deep down, she knew the truth. Some of those patterns had started long before the fame, back when Sean was still her boy, still under her roof. But what pushed her over the edge was a private conversation with a young woman who claimed to be one of Diddy's victims. The woman, trembling, asked Janice just one question: "Did you really not know?" That question, Janice said, broke her, because she did know, or at least she suspected, and still said nothing. In her own words, "I kept quiet thinking I was protecting my son, but I was only protecting the monster he became." Her voice cracked. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. There were no objections, no interruptions, just the truth, finally spoken and impossible to ignore. As Janice's testimony continued, the courtroom leaned in, expecting scandal, but not this kind of insight. She didn't just talk about what Diddy did, she spoke about who he was, even as a child. She recalled a young Sean who craved dominance, even in childhood games. If he wasn't the leader, he wouldn't play. If someone questioned him, he'd turn cold. She described moments when he'd manipulate friends to turn on each other just to feel like the puppet master. At first, she chalked it up to ambition or intelligence. But as he grew older, that need for control became more dangerous. Janice described moments of deep unease, private outbursts, sudden mood swings, an obsession with image and status. She said he developed an early belief that people were pawns. And once he realized that charm and fear could be used in equal measure, he began using both as weapons. She told the court, "He learned how to make people love him, fear him, and depend on him all at once. That's when I knew I didn't have control anymore." He did. The courtroom again fell into a heavy silence. These weren't just accusations. These were red flags that had been ignored for years. And now, in front of a jury, a mother was finally acknowledging them. If the courtroom was already stunned, Janice's next revelations pushed the tension into the stratosphere. She claimed that as Diddy rose through the ranks of the music industry, she was there, on the sidelines, watching doors open that most people never even knew existed. Janice described being present during exclusive gatherings, held in mansions with no cameras, no press, and no outsiders. She said powerful executives, celebrities, and political figures would attend, and that Diddy was often not just a guest, but a host. She never saw outright crimes, she clarified, but she saw things that made her skin crawl. People entering rooms and coming out changed. People whispering about loyalty pacts. People who once questioned Diddy suddenly falling silent or disappearing from the spotlight altogether. Most disturbing of all, she claimed Diddy began referring to himself as untouchable. He would allegedly brag about favors he was owed, about secrets he held on others. According to Janice, he began to view the industry not as a business, but as a kingdom, with himself as king. And everyone else, pieces on his board. He didn't just play the game, Janice said solemnly, he rigged it. What Janice implied was clear. Diddy wasn't acting alone. He was part of something bigger. And whatever it was, it had protected him for far too long. By this point in the testimony, the courtroom had shifted from shock to solemnity. Janice wasn't speaking with anger. She wasn't even trying to distance herself from her son. What the jury witnessed was something far more devastating, a mother in pain. Her voice trembled as she admitted the guilt that's haunted her for years. She called herself an accomplice to silence, someone who helped build the myth while ignoring the man. She admitted that there were moments when she looked away, even when the signs were right in front of her. She wanted to believe in his goodness, because what mother doesn't want to believe her child is still redeemable? At one point, she paused mid-testimony, wiped her eyes, and whispered, "This is not how it was supposed to be." She talked about the inner torment, the sleepless nights, the anxiety every time his name trended, the dread every time someone from the past reached out. She described herself as a prisoner of her son's image, locked behind the brand that she once helped protect. And yet, despite it all, Janice made one thing heartbreakingly clear: she still loves him. But love, she said, can't blind you forever. "This is not vengeance," she told the court. "This is truth, and it's long overdue." The room was silent. Nobody moved, because in that moment, they weren't just witnessing a celebrity trial. They were watching a mother break, publicly, painfully, and with brutal honesty. As Janice stepped down from the witness stand, the air in the courtroom was thick, like everyone had forgotten how to breathe. The usual buzz of reporters typing and legal teams whispering was gone, replaced by something far heavier: silence. Some jurors wiped their eyes. One was seen pinching the bridge of his nose, clearly trying to hold back emotion. Even the judge, normally a pillar of composure, took a brief pause before proceeding. Janice's testimony hadn't just exposed Diddy, it had shaken the very foundation of the trial. Court staff reported later that several spectators left the room early, visibly distressed. One journalist even described the moment as the most human, raw, and haunting thing I've ever seen in court. It wasn't about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about reckoning, about accountability, and the pain of watching a legacy unravel in real time. And as for Diddy, he didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He just sat there, stone-faced, staring ahead, as if he wasn't sure whether to be furious, broken, or afraid. This wasn't just another day in court. This was the day the truth walked in. Not from a prosecutor or a witness with a grudge, but from the one person who once promised to love him unconditionally. And that truth hit harder than any allegation ever could. While the courtroom processed the emotional wreckage left by Janice's testimony, all eyes gradually shifted to one man, Sean Diddy Combs. How would he respond? But the answer was, he didn't. Not a word, not a tear, not even a flicker of emotion across his face. Just an icy stillness, arms crossed tightly, eyes locked on the floor like he was somewhere else entirely. No whisper to his lawyer, no glance at his mother. It was as if he'd turned to stone. Some called it composure, others saw it as pure defiance. Body language experts analyzing the footage later described his demeanor as textbook emotional containment, a strategy often used to assert dominance in high-stakes situations. But was it confidence, or a sign that the cracks were finally starting to show behind the mask? Whispers circulated that his legal team was blindsided by Janice's appearance. Sources say Diddy had no idea she was going to testify, and when her name was called, he reportedly muttered under his breath, No way. And yet, he said nothing publicly. No reaction, no statement, no attempt to spin the narrative. But perhaps the most telling detail of all, he didn't look at her. Not once. Whether it was guilt, rage, or something darker, Diddy's silence in that moment said more than any outburst ever could. And the courtroom felt it. Everyone did. It didn't take long for the outside world to catch up. Within minutes of Janice Combs stepping off the witness stand, the headlines exploded. News outlets scrambled to rewrite their coverage. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #Diddy trial, #Janice Combs, and #Mother Testifies began trending across platforms. Clips of her teary-eyed testimony spread like wildfire, millions of views within hours. But it wasn't just the media. The public shifted. Up until this point, opinion on Diddy's guilt was split. Some still clung to his legacy, insisting the accusations were exaggerated or opportunistic. But when his own mother, the woman who raised him, protected him, and once defended him in the press, sat in that witness box and said, "I was wrong to stay silent," everything changed. Suddenly, the usual defenses felt hollow. The denials sounded weaker. Comment sections filled with messages like, "If his mom couldn't defend him, why should anyone else?" And this isn't just a fall from grace, this is a full-blown collapse. And in Hollywood, the whispers turned to shouts. Collaborators started deleting old posts. Former friends began distancing themselves. Brands pulled ads. People who had once been silent were now being asked, "What did you know?" The tide had turned, and for the first time in Diddy's decades-long reign, it wasn't under his control. As the courtroom doors closed and Janice Combs disappeared from public view, one thing became painfully clear. This isn't just a trial anymore, it's a reckoning. The man once seen as untouchable is now surrounded by crumbling walls. Former allies stepping back, public opinion shifting, and now his own blood turning against him. And while the legal process still has a long way to go, the emotional verdict is already echoing loud and clear. What happens next could be unprecedented. Will more insiders come forward now that the silence has been broken? Will Diddy finally speak? Or will his empire continue to collapse in slow motion, brick by brick, truth by truth? One thing is certain, when a mother chooses justice over loyalty, it sends a message no PR team can clean up. And if this is what Janice Combs was willing to say in public, just imagine what she kept to herself.